It is a rainy, humid, sticky, foggy day in the South following what was some record low temperatures a few days ago. So it's hard to keep up. Hi, readers. It's Lori. Welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper. Welcome if this is your first time. I was thinking about the ways in which it's hard to keep up with some things, or maybe we're receiving too much information about the same things. And so this prompted my musing about a certain type of books that I have in my physical TBR that I have not read, and is now the time to do that. I will admit, frankly, I'm a little disappointed, but it is on me. I did not make the deadline to respond to the first round of the BookTube prize. So I find myself now in the middle of, well, almost the end of January, not having to read 6 books in the next 2 months that somebody else has put forward for me. So I have kind of an open space for myself to be able to read whatever I want. And so I've been thinking about what I'm feeling drawn to lately and what's on my mind the most, and kind of what is on the backlist that I haven't taken a look at. And so I'm bringing forward some pretty significantly old books, at least for me, on my backlist, and how they correlate to what's happening currently. So, you probably, if you live in the United States, and probably if you live anywhere in the world, you've been hearing a lot of news and buzz around the US political process and about the elections in particular, and about who's running and who's not running, and who's favored to win and who will be the nominee, and all of those things that we experience every 4 years. Sometimes this gap of time shortens a little bit because people start planning and running ahead of time, and as they haven't always done in the past. But generally speaking, you cannot turn on the news without hearing something about politics. If you're me, that may be a little, um, what's the word I want to use? I don't know. I'm just not a fan of watching the same pundits talk about the same things over and over again. Let's just say that. I'm not a fan of the news for that very reason. It just feels like the same news is repeated and repeated and repeated all day, all day, all day, all next day, next day, next day. But I have someone in my family who really loves to watch the news, so I just kind of tune it out. However, I am fascinated by the election process, by the democracy that we have created as a nation all those years ago. I'm fascinated recently by those podcasts that I've been listening to about presidents and about decisions that were made and about how they got elected or didn't get elected. And so it's just been on my mind lately. And so I've been thinking about books that are about elections or politicians or some sort of kind of US democracy related stuff. But I wanted them to be fiction because, quite frankly, the real world and the real life stuff can be a little bit scary. So here we go. I'm bringing forward some books that I have had on my backlist for a long time. I haven't read. One of them is nonfiction, but I will explain why I feel like it will be easier to read than it could be. And let's get started. And if you're interested in this topic and you have some titles to bring forward, please do in the comments below. I would certainly be fascinated by that. And I think some of our viewers and readers that are here in this community might be too. So let's get going. All right, so I was trying to think about the one that's been on my list the longest, and I think it's this one. This is Mrs. Magnolia Mud, Mississippi Mud, Magnolia Mud by Randy Pierce. Randy Pierce was a member of a committee that I served on for child welfare related issues, and he was a huge leader here in the state of Mississippi, and is still a huge leader here in the state of Mississippi. He's an attorney and a great guy, and I just really, really like him. And so he started writing some novels several years ago now. I've had this one on my shelves for a bit and I never got to it. Magnolia Mud is really unique to me because it kind of is right on pace with what we're experiencing now. This is about two people who are running for governor of Mississippi. One is already currently serving as the governor of Mississippi, and his name is Lee Jones. And his opponent, he's Republican, and his opponent is Anna Scott, who is a Democrat, and she is the lieutenant governor. So they've already had a relationship, okay? They begin to try to, garner votes and support for reelection slash election as governor. And as these things happen, they have to go out and campaign in all the communities in the state, or pretty much all of them. There are some pretty unique days in which people are on the campaign trail in unique ways in Mississippi, and I think that will probably address that too. But the real plot of this story is that they both hire campaign managers, and those campaign managers make some choices that maybe they wouldn't have individually made. Also, to complicate matters, they both have a daughter in the fourth grade, and their daughters have become best friends. The choices that were made in the campaign and some of the things that unfolded are causing some internal difficulty for them, as well as some external difficulty for them. The way that it describes it is they know that they've betrayed their campaign promises, and in doing so, they've strained their marriages. But the hard truth is that it would be political suicide not to continue the mudslinging. Okay, and then something tragic happens, and it, I think, changes the trajectory of the entire experience for them. I, when I reread the synopsis of this, I was like, oh gosh, I really do want to get to that sooner than later. And now would be a really good time to read it. So I think it's time for me to read Randy Pierce's Magnolia Mud. This one fascinates me. This one is a book that my partner purchased, but I was really excited about it. I know that Hillary Rodham Clinton is probably one of the most polarizing women in America. I really, I don't understand it completely, but I do know that I have experienced people who either really love her or really do not love her. So those of you who really do not love her are probably fast forwarding now, and that's fine. But Curtis Sittenfeld is an author that I have not read anything by, but I am curious about a couple of the books that he's written recently. But the trope of this is one of my favorites. The trope is, what if Hillary Rodham meets Bill Clinton and they don't end up married and together? How does that change the trajectory of her life? I'm curious about that. So it got a lot of buzz when it came out by a number of people, including the Washington Post, who said it was fiction as therapy. Good Morning America said it was immersive and escapist. New York Times said it was ingenious. So I have noticed this more than once as I'm looking at my books, and it might be fun. It might be a fun read to take on at this time of the season. And again, I'm not going to read all these in a month or anything like that. So, all right, not quite the oldest, but maybe the next oldest is Madam President by Nicole Wallace. I purchased this when it came out in 2015, and at that time I was aware of Nicole Wallace as a commentator or a co-host of The View, I think, or one of those programs where women were in the seats and were really giving a lot of information about topics and kind of controversial stuff, and then interviewing people as well. But Nicole Wallace actually served as the press secretary, I think. Was it press secretary? No, communications director for the George W. Bush administration. And she also ran parts of the McCain Palin campaign in 2008. So she has a lot of connection to the political process and has been someone who has since then done some different things. I don't know what she's doing now, but in 2013, 14-ish, sometime around that time, she wrote a book called Madam President. And this is about a woman president whose name is Charlotte Kramer. She's the 45th president of the United States, and she's agreed to let the news document a day in her life. So they're going to follow her around and discover kind of what they, I mean, with that within reason, right, about things that they are allowed to know, what the day in the life of a president is like. And on this day, something terrible and horrific happens. And so they have to mitigate both the exposure of this and also how to respond to this crisis. I don't want to know what it is. I don't want to know a whole lot about this, but it does seem gripping. It's not terribly long. And it also got some pretty good buzz from Rachel Maddow, USA Today, other authors, the Washington Post. So, yeah, all of these have some pretty good buzz. And then the only nonfiction on this list is a pretty beat up copy of a book called The Residence Inside the Private World of the White House. And this is literally just about the White House and how it runs. Of course, it has some connection to the presidents over time. And in fact, this one was published in 2016. So it does talk about the Obamas as well as the Bushes and the Clintons and a number of other presidents. But it really does sort of talk about what happens in the White House every day. And I've always been really curious about this. I've been able to be in the White House. I have been able to experience some of the tours that the public don't necessarily get. I'm really just always fascinated with the White House. I see the White House as iconic and historical. Preservation really is a key point of what they do, but also they have to, let people with children in many cases, right, live in a space that they are comfortable in and that they can navigate and that feels like home for a period of time. So I can't imagine that it's really easy. This is by Kate Anderson Brower, and it is a terribly beat up copy. Someone gave this to me because they thought I would enjoy it. She was going to put it in the little free library, and then she popped it at my doorstep and said, I think you would like this. It's sort of blurbed by Today as Downton Abbey for the White House staff. And I love Downton Abbey, and I really do appreciate the intensity of being a White House staffer. Definitely, there are some protocols that need to be met. I was thinking about this the other day. One of my favorite Christmas movies, which I watch every year, is Love Actually. And one of the pieces of Love Actually is that the Prime Minister of England is a character and kind of how he navigates coming into his role and how he navigates meeting the US president. And those scenes always really just stick with me, but also just noticing how, people are hired to do different things for the Prime Minister of England. People are hired to do different things for the presidents of the United States and for their families as well. So this could be a lot of fun. And it's also not particularly long. And there are some photos. Which I appreciate. Rosalind Carter and Jimmy Carter, and she just passed away. That's my 4 picks for reading at this particular juncture of U.S. history. We are making history in the United States. So we're making choices now about who we will vote for, and we are making choices in the future about who we will vote for across the United States in different places. And so it just felt like a good time for me to read maybe 1 or 2 of these, and maybe I could commit to all of these this year because it will be an interesting one, right? Okay, thanks readers for watching. Thanks for listening. I can't wait to hear what you read about these kinds of things. And if you've read any of these, I would love to hear that. And as always, happy reading. Bye.